Hey, what's up, Facebook? What's up, fellas? Coming to you live. This is Mike, your mentor for the Sunday sermon. Happy Easter to everybody. Hope that you had a good day. If you're watching this live, give me some love. If you're watching the replay, give me some love. I appreciate you guys tuning in to what we got today on the Sunday sermon. Before I get into that, if you're new to this page, welcome. To give you a little backstory about me, my name is Mike King, and I had a pretty rough, chaotic, dysfunctional childhood. My dad was in and out of prison. He disappeared around the age of 10, came back into our lives at the age of 15, or came back into my life at the age of 15, and it started this cycle, this almost, I think it was a 6 or 8 year period of him showing up and disappearing, showing up for my graduation from high school, disappearing, showing up when my brother committed suicide and disappearing, showing up for my college graduation, and then he finally died shortly after that. So growing up without a father, um, and going through all of that stuff was extremely tough. And now at times, and now that I'm 38 and I look back on my life, I wonder, how can somebody who's been through the things that I've been through, or worse, or maybe not even as bad, make something out of their lives? Like, what are the defining moments or the defining things in my life that helped me? And I was able to identify two, actually a little bit more than two, but the two main ones were, God's grace. Without God, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't even be alive. And two, I had mentors in the books that I was reading and hearing about their stories and how they changed their lives and made a decision to do something about their lives. It didn't matter what circumstance they were in. They realized that they had a choice and they could choose to do something about it, and that's exactly what they did. And then I had mentors in my life, uncles, my grandpa, coaches, other men that were strategically placed in my life that at the time I I wasn't always aware of how they would impact me and affect me, and I watched everything they did like a hawk, because I wanted to see, would they talk the talk, and or would they walk the walk? And I admired the ones that walked the walk, the ones that invited me into their house to see how they lived, to see how they treated their family, to see how they treated those people out in the community, how they lived life and the decisions that they made. And it was huge for me because I just gleaned all that and soaked it up like a sponge. And now that I'm older, I want to take those same seeds that were planted in me and plant them in other people. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're younger than me. It doesn't matter if you're older than me. Wisdom is wisdom. It has no bias. It knows no age, right? You either want it and you seek it out, or you don't want it and you don't seek it out. But that's what this channel is about, me sharing my experiences, the lessons I've learned, and hoping that it makes a difference in other people's lives. I don't hope, actually, I know it's making a difference in other guys' lives because of the guys that reach out to me behind the scenes and share stuff with me, and that I get to experience and help them through different parts of their lives. Not because I'm special, because if you follow this page and you watch any of my old videos, you'll know that I made a lot of mistakes along the way. But you know what? I learned a lot from those mistakes. And if those mistakes can help someone else have a better life, not have to experience the things that I went through, then so be it. That's great. So we're going to jump into tonight's Sunday sermon. I'm going to share my screen here and get this pot up. And tonight's Sunday sermon, right, we're on week 17. Holy cow, time is flying. If you're new to this page, I post every single day, whether it's a video or some sort of inspirational quote, or just some shout out to somebody who's made a difference in my life every day, 365 days a year. for 2019 is what God told me to do, so I'm trying to be obedient to that. So tonight's Sunday sermon is titled Rite of Passage, and a little bit of backstory, right? So we talked about how I dealt with all those wounds with my dad, those wounds with my mom, and here I am. I go through college and deal with my brother's suicide and my dad dying. And then I go to the Philippines and I'm able to minister and take those hard situations and share those and make a difference in other people's lives. And then I find myself back in the States, about to fulfill my dream of playing semi-pro basketball, and I walk away from that, and then I get into a relationship that doesn't go the way that it should have. I had some guys in my life wake me up to reality, and then I got out of that relationship, and shortly after that jumped into another one, and that relationship ended up becoming my wife, and I shared how I lied to her, and I hid secrets from her, and those things came out 2 weeks into our marriage. Well, some of them came out 2 weeks into our marriage, and how that set our relationship back 10 years. I was just thinking the other day about where we at our relationship now, and how I'm finally starting to see glimpses again of the Jody that I met when we were dating. Uh, the just how that person is starting to come back, and I lost 10 years of my life, 10 years of our marriage, because of what I did. Um, but being a man, part of that is taking responsibility for what you did, and I tried to do that. And I try to do that every day, not because I'm better than anybody, but because it's the right thing to do, and because that's what real men do. It's an honor and a privilege to be married to Jody, to have her be my wife. Right. So then after that, we talked about dealing with having to go to court for custody of Jody's son, and our daughter being born, and how God used all of that to repair broken relationships between Jody and her parents, right? And then now here I am. I'm a dad who didn't have a father, and is trying to figure out what that looks like, right? So there's a saying, and it goes, if everybody's doing one thing, or if a herd is going one place, just do the opposite, and you should be okay. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but that's kind of how I applied the philosophy, my parenting philosophy is, I just took everything that my dad did or didn't do, and in my life, and I tried to do the opposite when it came to me and my kids. And the interesting thing about what we're going to share, and I've kind of shared this in the past on some different days, but not really on a Sunday sermon yet, is it was a rite of passage, right? This time in a man's life, and it was a rite of passage for me in becoming a father, and it was a rite of passage for my son in becoming a young man. So, the first question, or the question that comes to mind when we think about manhood, especially in Western society, is, when did you become a man? And I've heard a multitude of answers uh, over the years. When we were younger, right? When I was growing up, at least, some people thought you were a man when you smoked your first cigarette. I mean, you were considered one cool dude if you smoked a cigarette. That was never my thing, and I think that was never my thing because my mom, at one period of our life, smoked cigarettes, and I couldn't stand it. And if you've ever had somebody who's smoked, try to give you a kiss or come in close for a hug, it can just, ugh. Um, I mean, it's pretty gross. So think that's what stopped me from ever wanting to smoke cigarettes. You know, the next answer we get is you become a man when you're able to drink your first beer, right? Another answer we get is you become a man when you're intimate with a woman for the first time in your life. Another answer is when you get in your first fight. And another answer, I guess I just wanted to put a picture of Arnold in here because Arnold was a beast. You know, maybe when you can bench 225, you're considered a man. You know, maybe when you have a chiseled physique, right? There's all these things that society tells us we're a man, but the truth is in Western society there is no actual uh, actual ceremony or actual initiation into manhood. There's no coming into manhood like there are in other societies, you know, where there's rite of passages. We're kind of left to figure this out on our own, and when men are left, or when boys are left to figure out manhood on their own, it often does a lot more harm than it does good, and hurt people, and here we are, we're generations removed from what God intended manhood to look like, and the problems that we face in the world are a direct reflection of that because men refuse to accept responsibility. Men, myself included at times, we lean and we go towards comfort and passivity. Uh, we don't sow eternally, meaning beyond us and in our immediate lives when our lives in reality affect our kids' lives, our grandkids' lives, our great grandkids' lives. We're affecting our family tree, and we don't live courageously. You know, all that courage we had as boys, right? When we weren't afraid to climb trees and to explore and to do all these things that young boys do. We've let society beat that courage out of us, uh, um, and it just lies dormant inside us. The courage to love our wives the way they want us to love them. The courage to be real with ourselves and stop lying to ourselves about how we feel or what we think. The courage to speak our mind. You know, we're so worried about other people's feelings and what they might think. And not to say that you shouldn't honor somebody in their feelings and what they think, but to the point where you don't even speak your opinion because of what you think might happen to you, um, it's really just a shame, to be honest with you. So, how do we change that? What is that? What does that look like? What can we do? So I submit to you that the best way to change that, and it doesn't matter how old you are, if you're a dad like me with a 17-year-old, or if you're a younger dad and you've got boys that are 6, 7, and 8, or maybe you're watching this and you're an older man and your 60s and your 50s. It's never too late to have a rite of passage for your son or for your daughter, right? Because as men and as husbands and as fathers, that's our responsibility and that's our duty to show our kids what manhood looks like. So tonight I'm going to just recap a little bit about what a manhood ceremony and rite of passage looks like, a couple ideas for you guys to think about, and then I encourage you to put something together for your own kids and move forward in that. For the last month or so, I've been praying about what I should do for my son's 18th birthday and what that should look like. And God has shown me a couple things, and I'll share those things with you guys here when we're done. So I take the three-stage approach to the rite of passage. In the three-stage approach, looks like this. So stage one typically happens around puberty, right? Because that's a big defining moment in a young man's life. Your body's changing, you're noticing the opposite sex, all those things are going on, right? It's a very pivotal point, and if we can just come alongside our sons or another young man and help them through that, that's very powerful. Excuse me a second. The second stage in a young man's life is around the age of 18, right? That's when society deems that you become a man, and you're done with your basic schooling, and there's an opportunity for you to move out into out of the house and into the world, and to forge your own way. And then the third stage in this is when you're going to get married, right before you're going to get married, because no longer are you not only responsible for yourself, but you're saying that you're willing to be responsible for another person, right? Which is your bride, and to love that person through sickness and health, through good and through bad, all of those type of things. So you have those three pivotal stages in every young man's life, and how as men, how as fathers, can we help them navigate and move into each of those stages effectively? So the first stage for me and my son started when he was 13, or when he was going to become 13. And I started thinking about this because I got this idea from, I can't show it, but on, in this mode I can't show it, but on every Friday night we go through this workbook, The Authentic Manhood by Dr. Robert Lewis, and this is where I first heard this idea from, about how he took his sons through this rite of passage series, right? And I was blown away. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Like, man, I would have loved to have gone through something like that. So going back to my philosophy on parenting and being a father, I thought about my dad and how he never did anything like that for me. I shouldn't say he never did. He wanted to. His idea was of a rite of passage was, one time we were going for a ride in his semi truck, and he was taking me to a bank because I mean, he was trying to be a dad, right, in his own way. He was taking me to a bank because he said he was going to set up this checking account, and he was going to start putting money in it for me and my sister and my brother to help us out. I don't know if that was child support money he was supposed to be giving to my mom or whatever the case. He was, so he was trying to teach me about bank account. And we got in this conversation about girls, and he was asking me if I had a girlfriend, and I think I had one at the time. And he was telling me, he was kind of like, "Oh man, what are you doing?" He's like, "Don't be tied down to no girls." He's like, "There's so many beautiful women in the world. Like, there's just too many beautiful women to be tied down. You got the rest of your life to be married or to be hitched or to have a girlfriend, something like that." And then he said, "This is what I'm gonna do. When you're 21, I'm gonna take you." He said when I was there, 18 or 21, he was gonna take me to a brothel, right? And I didn't really understand that at that time, but when I got a little bit older, I understood that. And like I said, like, I want to honor my dad. He was taking what he knew and was trying to pass it on to me, right? So I want to take what I know to be right and to be helpful and to pass it on to my son. And I just thought this was an awesome idea, and it was something that I needed to do. So I started to plan what this was going to look like. And Robert Lewis suggested that, to the weeks prior to the actual day, the rite of passage, that you have some structured type of teaching. And he talked about how he took his boys through this series on puberty and sex and stuff, I think by Dr. James Dobson. Excuse me. Um, and how it made what a difference it made in his son's life. And I didn't do that exact one, but something along the lines of that, where we talked about, this time in his life where his body was changing, and how he was going to start feeling towards girls, and what to expect in the upcoming years of his life as he moved into junior high, and peer pressure, and all of that stuff. And it was a culmination of weeks of us talking about it, and what men do, right, planting those seeds in his mind of what that looked like. So then Dr. Lewis said that you want to have, when the day comes, right, where this day of this ceremony comes, you want to do something fun, right? That's age appropriate, so that they can remember that day. So we went, me and some other guys, and we went paintballing. And then Dr. Lewis said, you want to have a ceremony, and you don't want to. It's not a time for you to pinch pennies, right? It needs to be rememberable, because it is a significant time in their lives. And then you want to cap that ceremony off with a capstone by getting them an age-appropriate gift that will remind them of that time. So real quick, here's what we ended up doing. So I enlisted the help of one of my best friends. His son has the same age as my son, and I told him about this idea. He was all on board for it, so we were going to do it for both of our sons. So we took our sons up to my grandpa's cabin, and the night before, we played some paintball. I had enlisted some other guys that meant something in my life, and asked them if they would take part in this, and then also at the ceremony the next day, if they would, uh, you know, spend a couple minutes talking about what manhood means to them, and some of the things they wish they had known at that age about the upcoming years, about the teenage years, right? And so when we were done playing our paintballs the night before, so the next day, the kids, the boys were out in the woods shooting BB guns, and we were hanging out playing cards, and I think we shooting some handguns and stuff. Well, so night comes around, and we have the ceremony, so we ended up having this big supper, grilling some steaks over the fire, and just eating really good. And then we got into the ceremony part, where we sat them down, and then each guy went around and talked about what it meant to be a man, and what they wish they had known at that age. And then my buddy said something, and then I shared my words with the two boys, and then we all came around and laid hands on them, and prayed for them, right? And it was an extremely powerful moment, extremely powerful time. There wasn't a dry eye in the place, and God just blessed that, and we encouraged them, and we cast vision into their life, and we told them what great men they were going to be, and how they were going to do great things, and how they had the power to change the world, and just all this stuff, right? Spoke life into them, and then we capped it off by presenting them with a gift, and I'd been praying about that, and God had told me to get them swords, and so I got my son. You'll see here in the next picture, like a William Wallace type sword, and then I got my friend's son a samurai sword, and we presented to them, and then God had told me some things about each of the boys that were represented by the swords they received, like it was a reflection of the kind of person they were, and the traits that they had. So that was pretty cool. So I'll show you this picture here. So they've kind of they're taking a little fancy picture here from when they were 13. Man, that just seems like yesterday, and it's almost 5 years ago. Man, time flies. So that was phase one, right? So now my son is going to turn 18 here in June, and it's time for phase two. So I've really been thinking about this, and what I was going to do for that. So So I went and talking to my buddy again and saying, hey, 18's coming up. It's time for phase 2. Are you game? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. Here's what God's been speaking to me. So we're gonna take the boys through this book right here, which I've done before, which is 33, the series A Man and His Story. And it talks about, well, it addresses, their story up to this point, and uh, the relationship that they've had with dad, the relationship that they've had with mom. And it talks about the different wounds that men experience as they grow up. And our goal in taking them through this is to help them be able to identify those things, but not only identify those things, deal with those things in an appropriate way. And then I still gotta figure out something fun that we're gonna do with the boys, but this time we're gonna cap it off with a family celebration. So we're gonna bring together the two families, right, when this is all said and done, and we're gonna have a ceremony, and it'll be a little bit more formal. We'll probably wear some nice clothes, go to a nice restaurant, and really make this thing a big deal, and share some more words with our sons as they move into this next phase of their lives. And what I'm going to be presenting to my son is he's really into flags, right? And I'm going to get him a flag of our family crest. And this is what it looks like. I don't know anything about my family background, the history or not, so I just, was praying to God, and I took upon myself to make my own family crest. And there's some things on here that I'm going to explain to my son and talk to him about what those things mean. And as we live our lives as being part of the King family, how we need to remember those things. And these are our core values, right? As men, as part of this family. So we'll have some other family members there too. That'll share some things. Ask his mom to share some things. So that'll be phase 2, right? And then phase 3 will take place when he finds that lucky lady in his life, and he's gonna go get married. So that's the 3-phase approach. You don't need to have something as elaborate as that. You don't need to do the 3 phases. Any son would be fortunate enough and would be extremely grateful to have any one of those phases, right? Even if your boys are past that phase and you're older and they're older, that doesn't stop you from, doing something fun with your son, getting some other guys to be involved in it, and then having some sort of ceremony where you have a dinner and you speak life into them. You encourage them. You talk about how proud you are of them. You talk about how you love them. You talk about what they're good at, right? You cast some vision over them and their future, and then you pray for them, and then you present them something memorable, right? That will make a capstone for that evening. So that's it for tonight. In the Sunday sermon, I want to encourage you. Take this stuff serious. These types of things, like, this is what changes someone's life. This could be the difference between somebody going this way and somebody going this way, right? What kind of dad do you want to be? What kind of man do you want to be? Now, I think that if you're watching this, I know the answer to that. But you know what? We, as guys, we learn stuff every day. Learning stuff is one thing. Actually applying it to our lives and doing something with it is a completely another thing. So I love you guys. I will see you tomorrow for My Life Monday. Take this stuff, start praying about it, start thinking about it, and then do what the Lord tells you to do. All right. Have a good night. See you tomorrow.